Example 2, and this is going to be a challenge, but we're expressing one function in terms, that's a spelling error, one function in terms of another. Express cosine in terms of tangent. Okay, cosine x in terms of tangent x. Now, think about what we're doing. If I said 3x plus 2y equals 6, and if I said express y in terms of x, express y in terms of x, okay, that means solve for y. All right, that means solve for y. And so you subtract the 3x over, and you divide by 2. I just expressed y in terms of x. Okay, basically they're saying solve for y. Here they're saying solve for cosine. Okay, solve for cosine x. So I know a lot of students just don't understand what that means. Express cosine x in terms of tangent x. I want cosine x equals blah 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 tangent x blah blah blah. Okay, that's what I'm looking for, right? So what we have to do is we have to find an equation that relates those two functions. All right, and so I think a lot of the times people want to use this one. And that's a great idea because it has a tangent in it and it has a cosine in it, but we've got this problem of having a sine in it. I don't have any information about sine. I don't want sine. It doesn't say write cosine in terms of tangent and sine. It just wants cosine in terms of tangent. So I'm not really allowed to have that sine in there at all. So we need to find another way of doing it. Okay? What we're going to have to do, tangent squared x plus 1 equals cosecant squared x. No, that's not right. It's secant squared x, isn't it? Secant squared x. Okay? Tangent squared x plus 1 equals secant squared x. Because we're going to be able to flip this secant. We know the reciprocal of secant is cosine. And so that's going to be our connection. All right? So let's start with that identity. And let's say, okay, secant is 1 over cosine. So we're going to say tangent squared x plus 1 equals 1 over cosine squared x. And then, there's a couple of ways of thinking about it. If you want to think about it as cross multiplication, go for it. Or if you want to think about flipping the equation, you don't want this cosine x on the bottom. Okay? So essentially we're flipping the thing. And it would say cosine squared x equals 1 over tangent squared x plus 1. Okay? If I cross multiply it, I'm trying to get the cosine squared x on the top. Okay? So you can think about cross multiplication, or you can think about flipping. Well, we got cosine squared x equals 1 over tangent squared x plus 1. Okay? Or maybe it would help if we wrote it backwards and said cosine squared x equals 1 over tangent squared x plus 1. At this point, we're almost there. Okay? We're almost there. We would just have to get rid of that square. And so we're going to get rid of that square by taking the square root. Take the square root. Now, one thing that a lot of people will forget is it's really a plus or minus. It's a plus or minus square root at that point. Okay? It's a plus or minus square root at that point. And if we knew what quadrant it was in, maybe then we could pick one. But since we don't, we can't. And we've got cosine x equals plus or minus. Square root of 1 is just 1. Square root of 1 is 1. And on the bottom, I would have the square root of tangent squared x plus 1. And, it would be nice if we were finished at that point. It looks like we're finished at that point. However, we know we can't end up with the square root on the bottom. Ever since algebra class, I don't know if it was algebra 1 or algebra 2, whenever you did that, you're not allowed to end up with that square root on the bottom. And so we're going to rationalize, just like we always have. You multiply by that square root, whole thing, tangent squared x plus 1, tangent squared x plus 1. And that's going to give us this big old mess. Okay? It's going to be plus or minus square root of tangent squared x plus 1 on the top. But then on the bottom, the square root goes away. Okay? What happens is if you've got square root of something times square root of something, it just ends up being that something. So on the bottom, we've got tangent squared x plus 1. And that's it. Cosine x equals plus or minus square root tangent squared x plus 1 all over tangent squared x plus 1. So again, think about what they asked me to do. They wanted me to write cosine in terms of tangent. That's what I did. I basically solved for cosine and rationalized it on.